In the scorched desert of Arizona, Warren Blackwood sought only one thing: vengeance for his family, mercilessly killed by an Apache tribe. But his hatred for them was so strong that he saved a dying woman in the sands, unaware that she was the very queen for whose head the biggest bounty had been offered. Fate brought them face to face to show that the real enemy isn't who you're hunting, but the one who betrayed their own people for war. Just listen to how shocking the twist of this drama turned out to be, and why justice, in the end, prevailed. In the state of Arizona, bleach white by the sun, where the air shimmered from the heat, and the rare saguaro cactuses seemed like lonely sentinels mid the endless sands, lived Warren Blackwood. In 1880, his name evoked mixed feelings in people. For some, he was a legend. For others, a ghost. Not a sheriff, not a bandit, not a prospector, but a man whose fate was forged from pain and loneliness. For 45 years, he bore the burden of a past that gave him no peace, turning him into a silent, harsh man with a face as if carved from stone. His eyes were such a piercing gray that it seemed all the cloudless sky of the prairies was frozen in them. There was no warmth in them, only cold resolve and hatred directed at the only enemy he could blame for his sorrow, the Apache tribe. 5 years ago, his ranch, Quiet Creek, was attacked. Warren was in town when it happened. He returned to the smoking ruins and found what was left of his life, his beloved wife, Mary, and their small daughter, Lily, whose laughter still rang in his ears, were dead. The only evidence of the tragedy, besides ash and blood, was an Apache arrow stuck in the gate. That arrow became his personal brand, a symbol that he had nothing more to lose, except for his thirst for revenge. He swore he would know no peace until he had avenged every stolen smile and every innocent life. Since then, he became a wanderer, driven by a single purpose. Warren led his horse, his old faithful shadow, along a winding trail that seemed to lead to nowhere. Streams of sweat ran down his dusty face, but he didn't notice the heat. His thoughts were occupied with something else. He was tracking a gang that, he believed, was trading in stolen Indian relics, and their leader, a man nicknamed Harpoon John, was known for his cruelty. Warren suspected that this gang was collaborating with scattered groups of Apache marauders. He believed they were responsible for all the tragedies in the region. His hatred was all-encompassing. It extended to everyone who had Indian blood. The conflict in his soul was so strong that it eclipsed all other feelings. Suddenly, through the monotonous whistle of the wind, he heard a weak, heart-rending moan. It was a sound that belonged neither to the desert nor to its inhabitants. Warren stopped shadow, peering into the air shimmering from the heat. His heart seemed to slow its pace.
I ask you to like and subscribe to the channel, so you will help me in motivation to make such great stories for you, and I will see that you like them. Enjoy watching, everyone.
He always trusted his instincts, and they told him that something was wrong. Dismounting, he pulled his Colt from his holster and moved cautiously toward a rocky outcrop. Behind the outcrop lay a woman, young, no more than 25, with raven black hair braided into pigtails. Her clothes rough-hide and leather leggings left no doubt she was Apache. The first thought that flashed like lightning through Warren's mind was, "It's a trap." His fingers tightened on the revolver's grip. His mind, hardened by years of hatred, screamed that he should leave, abandon her. But he was accustomed to order, and in his world, even hatred had rules. This woman was not an enemy with a gun, but a wounded victim. Her face was pale, covered in a layer of dust and abrasions. Blood had caked on her temple, and her breathing was barely perceptible. She was on the brink. His rage towards the Apache tribe was so great that he could barely breathe. He saw in her everyone who had taken his family. His mind painted pictures of the fire, Mary's screams, little Lily's helplessness, but at the same time, the instinct of a man who had saved others from death in the desert, could not simply pass by. He was a man of action, not inaction, and his internal compass, which he had long ignored, now pointed toward mercy. He put away his revolver, his hand trembling. What was he doing? Was he saving an enemy? Why? He didn't know the answer, but he felt it was right. It was as if the ghost of his father, an old doctor who never refused help, whether to a white settler or an Indian, stood behind him. The laws of the desert are simple, son. No one deserves to die of thirst. Those words, spoken many years ago, rang in his head. They were a part of him, a part of who he was before the tragedy. He knelt down, his knees cracking with fatigue. He reached for his flask, filled with water. For a moment, he froze, contemplating. It was a difficult moral decision. He could just turn away and no one would know. But Warren wasn't that kind of man. He was, above all, a man of honor. The honor he had buried for so long under the sand of his hatred was now breaking through. He unscrewed the cap of the flask and carefully, drop by drop, began pouring water onto her dry, cracked lips. He dampened a piece of cloth and gently wiped the blood from her temple. When the water touched her skin, she groaned, and her eyelids fluttered. She opened her eyes. They were dark brown, as deep as a prairie night, and there was not a trace of fear in them, only fatigue and pain. She looked at him without trying to escape or resist. It was the look of a cornered animal that had accepted its fate but was still on guard. Warren felt her gaze on him, and he became uneasy. He was so focused on saving her that he hadn't thought about the consequences. What would he do with her? Where would he leave her? Taking her to town would mean condemning himself to judgment. Leaving her would mean betraying his principles. He was at a dead end. The only way out was to take her to his hideout. He carefully lifted her into his arms. She was surprisingly light, like a feather. At that moment, as he carried her, he felt no hatred. He felt only the weight of her body and his own fatigue. He placed her on Shadow, and he walked alongside, leading the horse by the reins. They moved toward his secret refuge, an abandoned mine, located deep in a canyon that no one knew about. It was his last sanctuary, a place where he could be alone. He thought about her the whole way. Who was she? What happened to her? Why was she alone? This interest began to supplant his hatred. He looked at her back, at her black hair, at her proud profile. There was something about her that didn't fit his image of an enemy. She wasn't just an Apache. She was a woman who was fighting for her life. This sparked something like respect in him, which was a very strange feeling for him. He recalled stories about Apache warriors, about their cruelty, about their raids. He knew they were fierce and relentless. But this woman was not like that. She was fragile, vulnerable, and her life was hanging by a thread. Warren, despite all his resilience, couldn't just walk away. It was like finding a rare flower in the desert. You could pick it, but it was better to let it grow. This woman was that kind of flower. They reached the mine as the sun was beginning to set. Warren helped her down, and she could barely stand on her feet. He laid her on an old blanket that he always kept with him. She was so weak that she couldn't even speak. Warren built a small fire and prepared the rest of his food. He gave her a piece of dried meat. She took it and ate it without a word. Her eyes never left him. In them, he saw not gratitude, but wariness and, perhaps, a hint of surprise. She must have expected him to abandon or kill her, as many settlers did with Indians. But he had saved her. Warren sat across from her, staring into the fire. He remembered the words of his wife, Mary, who always said that evil had no nationality. Evil is a choice, Warren, not a skin color, she would say. He didn't want to listen to her then. But now, looking at this woman, he was beginning to understand that she was right. Hatred had blinded him, and he saw nothing but his grief. But now, with a living, suffering person in front of him, his hatred began to wane. He took an old, tattered journal from his bag. It was his father's journal, in which he described his travels and encounters with different people, including Indians. Warren's father was a doctor, and he often told him about his work. He treated both white people and Indians. He told Warren about the wisdom of the elders, about their connection to nature, about how they, just like white people, had their fears and hopes. Warren had never paid attention to it, but now, looking at this woman, he understood that his father was right. All night, Warren sat by the fire, watching her. She slept peacefully, her breathing steady. He thought about how life was not as simple as it seemed. It was full of contradictions and unexpected turns. He hated Apaches, but he saved one. He wanted revenge, but now his goal seemed less clear. His hatred was his shield, his protection from pain. But now that shield had a crack. When the sun began to rise again, painting the desert in pink and orange tones, the woman woke up. She sat up, looked at Warren, then at his colt lying nearby, and then back at him. She said nothing. She just nodded in gratitude. This simple gesture, this silent nod, meant more to Warren than any words. It showed that she trusted him, that she saw him not as an enemy, but as a savior. He pointed to the water flask and gestured for her to drink. She took the flask, took a few sips, and then pointed to her mouth. She couldn't speak. Warren realized she was mute. It was another discovery that made her even more vulnerable. He felt compassion for her, which he had long suppressed. Her pain was as real as his. He was lonely, but she was lonely twofold. He began to use signs to learn her name. He pointed to himself and said, "Warren." She looked at him, and then pointed to her mouth. He understood she couldn't answer. He pointed to the horse, to a saguaro, to the sun, and she understood that he wanted her to show him who she was. She took a stick, dipped it in the sand, and began to draw. She drew a mountain, then drew the sun and the moon, and then drew a female silhouette with a crown on her head. Warren looked at the drawing, not understanding. She drew it again, but this time she added an arrow pointing down. Warren understood. She was the Apache queen. The shock was so strong that he felt the world around him begin to spin. He had saved a woman who was his enemy. He had saved the one for whose head the biggest bounty in the whole state had been set. He was not just a guy. He had become part of history, part of an Indian legend. He looked at her face and saw in it not just beauty, but strength and wisdom. He saw in her something more than just an enemy. And at that moment, when he realized that the woman he had saved was not just a stranger, but the legendary Apache queen, the hatred that had been his driving force for so long began to melt away, giving way to interest. He wanted to know her story. He wanted to know why she was alone in the desert. He wanted to know what had happened to her. He knew that his life would never be the same. He had embarked on a path that was full of dangers and unexpected turns. He didn't know what awaited him, but he was ready for it. The shock and the reveal of the secret. The whole story changes direction abruptly. His revenge, his hatred, all of it is now in question. He is forced to reconsider his beliefs and accept that his enemy is not just an enemy, but a person who, like him, is suffering. These are the emotional swings that hold the attention. He saved her because it was his inner calling, but now he will have to pay for it. The morning in the abandoned mine was cool and damp, which was a rare mercy in this scorched Arizona hell. Warren sat on a rock, watching as Naylin, whose face was now clean of dust and blood, surveyed his modest refuge. Her eyes, deep and intelligent, showed no fear, only caution and interest in return for his. Warren, a man of few words, felt that words were not needed here. Their communication became a kind of silent dance, where every gesture, every movement of her eyes, had its own meaning. He took an old notepad and a pencil from his bag and handed them to her. Naylin took them. Her fingers were long and thin, yet at the same time strong and calloused. She slowly wrote on the paper, "Why did you save me?" Warren pondered. He didn't know the answer himself. He wrote back, "I don't know." She seemed to understand and nodded. Then he wrote, "Who are you?" She smiled at the corner of her mouth. "You know who I am. You saved the queen. But I am no longer a queen. I was betrayed." Her words were like a gunshot. Warren felt his worldview, which he had built for years, crumbling. His hatred was based on the assumption that all Indians, Apaches in particular, were a single, cruel people. But Naylin was proof otherwise. She had been betrayed by her own people. He wrote, "Why?" She took a deep breath and began to write, and each word was like a hammer blow, destroying his former beliefs. "My brother, he wanted power. He wanted war. He thought that was the only way our people could survive. I thought differently. I wanted peace. I wanted us to be able to live on our land, not run from soldiers. But my words were weak. His words were strong. He left me to die so no one could stop him." Warren read this, and pain appeared in his eyes. It was not his pain, it was hers. He felt her loneliness, her despair. He knew that feeling. He himself had been betrayed, not by a brother, but by fate. He knew what it was like to be alone in this world when everything you believe in falls apart. This was compassion that was born from shared suffering. He no longer saw her as an enemy, he saw her as a person who, like him, suffered from injustice. In the following days, as they recovered in the abandoned mine, their relationship developed. They communicated without words, using gestures and drawings in the sand. Naylin taught him to read animal tracks, to identify by scent what animal had passed on the trail. She showed him how to find water in the driest places, how to prepare food from desert plants. He, in turn, taught her how to use a rifle, explaining how the mechanism worked. Warren realized that she was not just a strong woman, she was wise. Her knowledge was not from books, but from life, and he admired her ability to survive in such harsh conditions. One night, as they sat by the fire, Warren decided to tell her his story. He took a stick and began to draw in the sand. He drew a house, his wife Mary, and their little daughter Lily. He drew them happy, and then he drew a fire and an arrow. He pointed to the arrow, and then to her face. Naylin understood. She looked at him with pain in her eyes, and then, taking the stick, she drew another arrow next to his, broken in half. She pointed to him, then to herself. She wanted to show that their pain was mutual, that they were both victims of injustice. At that moment, Warren felt the wall he had built around his heart begin to crumble. Nayland was an unusual woman. Her silence was full of meaning, and her eyes said more than any words. He realized that she not only survived, she prevailed. She overcame pain, betrayal, and loneliness. He felt that his alliance with her was not just about survival, it was a chance for healing. He offered her his help so that she could return to her tribe and restore peace. He didn't know what awaited him, but he was ready for it. They set off when the moon was high in the sky. The desert was cold and silent, but they were not afraid. Warren led Shadow, and Nayland walked beside him, like a shadow. She was his guide, his protector. She knew every rock, every trail, every canyon. She was the queen of the desert, and now she was his ally. Their path was full of dangers. They encountered wild animals, patrols, and other Indian tribes, but they always found a way out. Their cooperation was impeccable. Warren was strong and resilient, and Nayland was smart and cunning. They were the perfect team. One day, they came across a troop of soldiers who were chasing Indians. Nayland gestured for him to hide, and she hid behind a rock herself. She watched the soldiers, and then showed him that they were looking for her. They were looking for her. Warren felt his heart clench with fear. He didn't know what to do. If he turned her in, he would get a huge reward. But if he didn't, he would be risking his life. The choice was difficult. Warren stood before a moral dilemma. He could betray her, but he couldn't do it. He no longer saw her as an enemy, he saw her as an ally, a friend. He saw in her a person he trusted. He couldn't betray her. This was his revelation, his realization. When the soldiers left, he came out from behind the rock and saw that Nayland was sitting on the ground. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking into nowhere. There was sadness in her eyes, but not fear. She knew he could have betrayed her, but she trusted him. "I wouldn't have betrayed you," he wrote in the sand. She looked at him, and tears appeared in her eyes. She hugged him, and at that moment, he felt his heart, which had been cold for so long, begin to beat again. This was reconciliation, an alliance that was based on trust and mutual respect. They were more than just a hero and an enemy. They were two people who found each other in the desert and became everything to each other. At this stage, the story reaches its climax as Warren overcomes his hatred and fully accepts Nayland. Their relationship develops from hostility to a deep alliance, which will become the foundation for the final part of their adventure. The path that Warren and Nayland had traveled was not just a road through the sun-scorched desert of Arizona. It was a path from mutual distrust to a deep alliance. Their communication, devoid of words, became incredibly strong. He learned to read her eyes, the movement of her hands, the subtle changes in her face. She, in turn, read him. She saw that behind his harsh face was a man broken by grief, but still capable of mercy. They had been walking for several weeks, moving at night to avoid the heat and encounters with soldiers or other tribes. They spent their days in abandoned canyons and caves. Their alliance was tested more than once. One day they came across a rattlesnake that bit Warren's horse, Shadow. Nayland, using her knowledge of herbs and poisons, was able to save the animal. Warren was amazed by her wisdom and strength. He realized that she wasn't just surviving, she was part of this land, its soul. "You and this land are one," he wrote in the sand. Nayland smiled. Warren had never seen her smile before. It was a smile that said more than words. It was filled with sadness and wisdom, but at the same time there was hope in it. They reached the place where Nayland's tribe was located. It was a hidden canyon, surrounded by sheer cliffs, which was virtually impossible to find without knowing the trail. At the entrance, they were met by a young warrior with a spear. He didn't recognize Nayland. He looked at her with suspicion, and at Warren with open hostility. Nayland made a few gestures, and the warrior understood that she had returned. He bowed to her, and then indicated that he would go ahead to warn the tribe. When they entered the camp, Warren was stunned. He expected to see savage barbarians, but saw peaceful people. Children were playing, women were cooking food, men were working. They were like any other people he had seen. This was a blow to his prejudices. He realized that his hatred was based on a lie. The leader in the camp was Nayland's brother, named Running Wolf. He was tall and strong. His face was hard and severe. He looked at Nayland, and then at Warren, and hatred flared in his eyes. He couldn't believe that his sister had returned, and with a white man at that. "How did you survive?" he asked her. Nayland silently pointed to Warren. Running Wolf looked at him. You saved her. Why'd? To get a reward. He spoke in broken English. Warren shook his head. No. I just wanted to help. Running Wolf didn't believe him. He told Nayland that she should leave, that she was not welcome here. He said that she had betrayed her people and she wanted peace. He said that now she must die. But then an old woman came out of the crowd. She was a healer, and she was the mother of Nayland and Running Wolf. She said that they should listen to Nayland. She said that Nayland had brought the peace they had been seeking for so long. At that moment, another warrior entered the camp, bringing terrible news. The soldiers had found them. They had surrounded the canyon. Running Wolf looked at Warren. These are your people. You brought them here. Warren felt the ground slide out from under him. He didn't know what to do. He was at a dead end. He was between two enemies, and he didn't know who to believe. The test was at its peak. Running Wolf gathered his warriors. He wanted to fight. Nayland approached him and gestured for him to stop. She said that they had to negotiate. Running Wolf didn't listen to her. He was blinded by hatred. But at that moment, Warren approached him and said, "Your sister wants peace. Why don't you want to listen to her?" Running Wolf laughed. You speak of peace? Your people took everything from us. They took our land, our food, our lives. And now you speak of peace. I know what that's like, Warren said. I lost my family because of war. I know what it's like when you have nothing to lose. But hatred cannot be the answer. You can end this war. At that moment, a troop of soldiers appeared from behind the rocks. They were ready for battle. Warren looked at Nayland. She was scared, but she was ready to fight. She was ready to die for her people. Warren made a decision. He took a step forward, raised his hands, and shouted to the soldiers, "Stop. I am Warren Blackwood. I am here to negotiate." The soldiers stopped. The commander, an old, battle-hardened man, came forward. He knew Warren. "Blackwood, what are you doing here? Did you find her?" "I found her. And I won't turn her in. She wants peace. Her brother wants war. You can stop this." The commander looked at Nayland, and then at Running Wolf. He knew about the conflict in the tribe. He knew that Nayland was a legend, and her brother was known for his cruelty. He thought. He was tired of this war. He knew it would never end. He looked at Warren and nodded. "All right. I agree, but only if she speaks with us." Nayland approached the commander and, using gestures, explained her story to him. She explained that her brother wanted war, that she wanted peace. She said that her people didn't want to fight anymore. The commander understood. He said that they could conclude a peace treaty, but only if they surrendered their weapons. Running Wolf was furious. He pulled out a knife and wanted to lunge at Nayland, but Warren stopped him. He said, "Stop. You can end this war, or you can die." Running Wolf looked at him, and then at his tribe. He saw in their eyes fatigue and hope. He realized that he had lost. He threw his knife on the ground and said, "All right, I surrender." The denouement was unexpected. Warren, a man who once hated all Indians, became a peacemaker. He saved them. He gave them a chance at a new life. He realized that his hatred was false, that it had no meaning. He found in Nayland not an enemy, but an ally, a friend. And he found the strength within himself to forgive. Ultimately, Warren and Nayland stayed together. They couldn't return to their old lives. They were more than just two people. They were a symbol of peace and reconciliation. They were living proof that hatred can be overcome by compassion, that war can be ended by peace. The peace treaty was signed. Warren Blackwood, once a loner consumed by revenge, sat by the fire in the center of the Apache camp. Just a few weeks ago, he couldn't have imagined that he would be here, surrounded by people he once considered enemies. His faithful horse, Shadow, grazed peacefully next to the Indian ponies, and above his head hung a starry sky that seemed so close and bright in the desert. The air was filled with the smell of smoke, herbs, and teas. He watched as Nayland, his ally, and now close friend, spoke with her people. She was no longer the queen who had been betrayed by her family. She was a leader who had brought peace. Her voice, though still absent, was heard in the eyes of everyone who looked at her. In her was a strength and wisdom he couldn't help but respect. Warren looked at her, and his heart was filled with a warmth he hadn't felt since he lost his family. After the treaty was signed, Warren decided to stay. He couldn't just leave, abandoning Nayland and her people. He felt that his destiny was now tied to theirs. He began to help the tribe. He taught them new skills, new ways of farming, new ways of interacting with white people. He became a kind of bridge between two worlds that once considered each other enemies. Nayland had also changed. She became more open, more trusting. She laughed, she joked, she was happy. She found in Warren not just an ally, but a person she could trust with her life. They spent a lot of time together. They sat by the fire, looked at the stars, and communicated without words. They were happy. One day, as they sat on a hill, Warren wrote in the sand, "What will you do now?" Nayland smiled and took the stick. She drew two silhouettes, male and female, holding hands. She drew a house and a garden. She drew a horse and children. Warren understood that she wanted to start the new life. She wanted their alliance to become not just an alliance, but a family. Warren looked at the drawing, and tears appeared in his eyes. He never thought he could be happy again. He thought his life had ended when he lost Mary and Lily. But now he understood that his life was just beginning. They decided to build their house on the border of the tribe and the white settlement. It was a symbolic step. It was a bridge they were building between two worlds. They worked together, helping each other. Warren taught her how to build, and she taught him how to live in harmony with nature. They were the perfect team. Ultimately, Warren and Nayland got married. It was a quiet ceremony that took place with family and friends. Running Wolf, Nayland's brother, who once wanted to kill Warren, was now his friend. He realized that Warren was not an enemy, but an ally. He realized that peace was better than war. Warren and Nayland lived a long and happy life. They had children who were half Indian, half white. They were a symbol of a new generation that didn't know what war was. They were a symbol of hope. Warren never forgot his family, Mary and Lily, but now his pain was gone. His hatred had turned into love, his grief into happiness. He found in Nayland not just an ally, but his new family. He found his home in her. This story is over. It is a story about how two different people, from two different worlds, found each other. It is a story about how hatred can be overcome by compassion, how war can be ended by peace. It is a story that there is always hope, even in the darkest of times.